Hey guys, welcome back to Mario Luigi Partners in Time. Last episode we defeated the Shrooms for good and found out their weakness was actually baby tears of all things. Point is, EGAT is able to spray the entire Mushroom Kingdom of the past with the substance, and the Shroom Menace has been destroyed at long last. This time we'll be going back into the game and covering everything we didn't cover. I'll be talking about miscellaneous topics we didn't bring up in the main series, as well as unused content and some interesting bits of trivia about the game. So let's get started. First things first, let's start up our file again. We pick up right before the Trouser fight again. All these toads all will say the same thing. Go up to the next room, okay? None of the toads in the courtyard really say anything that interesting either. Great to see you!
Mario's my hero, great to see you! Welcome back, Luigi, I just keep up the good work holding down the fort. Is you after all, Mario's my hero!
You get the point. Now, I actually want to save right here. I think I have a frog in my throat, sorry about that. Because I want to show off what actually happens when you use Stuffwell's Warpulator or whatever he called it. Go back in time. Prepare to work your way back to the time before you rescue Princess Peach if you follow. You will retain possession of your current items and HP. Are you sure you want to go? Alright, Warpulator, switch on! We wind up back before the scene where we saved Princess Peach and fought the Shroom Mothership. If you go back up through, you'll talk to Princess Peach in the cutscene before the Mothership attacks will play out. You have to wonder why we don't just, tell her we know everything that's happening and try to make sure the Elder Princess doesn't break out of the Cobalt Star. But that's besides the point. Right here I'm gonna save and quit since I never actually showed this off. And you just get sent right back to the title screen. So, ultimately, nothing that important. And, sadly, that's really the only post-game there is. I think my biggest criticism of Partners in Time is how bare bones it is. It is a very linear game, and I don't really have a problem with that. But I really wish there was just more to do in it. Once you beat the game, there's no new minigames to go back and try out except for in Glomp Caverns. There's not a whole lot of secrets to find, and no real side quests of any sort. I also really like that dance Baby Mario is doing. But I do have to say that's probably my biggest criticism of this game. I wish there was just more to do in it. And that's also another reason why I think this should have gotten a remake over Bowser's Inside Story. It would have benefited a lot from it. With that out of the way, let's go back through the story and see what else there is to talk about. First things first, I'm going to show off what happens if you choose the fleet command since I never chose it. You'll have to mash the button for each bro to get them off the screen. However, if you fail the command, the bro will trip and fall and you'll lose a bunch of coins. And even if one bro leaves the screen, the other bro can't trip and fall. So while you do get to leave a battle, you ultimately lose out on coins, so that's why I was so strongly suggested not fleeting. Now, at the very beginning of the game, right before we fight Baby Bowser, I know of a rumor about this fight that I cannot verify as of now. Supposedly, if you manage to defeat Baby Bowser in 5 turns or lower 20 of his HP, the game crashes. You're programmed to automatically win that fight in 5 turns, at which point he'll stop and then you'll just cut to the next cutscene. So I can't verify if you getting a lucky hit and defeating it, lowering his 20 HP actually does anything or not. But that is a rumor I have heard and I have not been able to figure this out. If you want, you can try this fight a bunch of times to see if there's any truth to it, but I personally will not be doing that here. Now, at the very start of the game, you save, and then choose to restart,
Nintendo!
only the adults will say Nintendo at the very start. However, if you save and restart at the Koopa Cruiser with just the babies and reload the game,
Nintendo!
only the babies say Nintendo. And they also will be the only ones on the clock hand. Same goes for the adult bros in the last clip I showed you. So it's a nice little Easter egg, but you can't do this at any other point in the game. In the fight with the Shrooms in Holly Jolly Village, where you face the forced loss, if you hack the game to actually beat them, the countdown timer will turn red and green. A little ironic considering those are Christmas colors with the whole theme of the area. And then the ordinary cutscene will just play out since the game doesn't know what to do when you beat them. I just realized how weird it must be to be a shroom in one of those saucers since they constantly spin around. Like, imagine trying to pilot but you're constantly being spun in circles. That seems like very impractical design. Right before the adults and the babies team up, before you leave and the babies start crying because you're leaving them behind, you can actually walk in circles around them and they'll turn to look at you. This is the only time they do that. Just thought it was an interesting thing I should mention. The bridge that appears when you hit this block in Baby Bowser's castle is actually a 3D version of the bridge that Bowser stands on in the original Super Mario Bros. So it's a nice callback to, well, one of Mario's earliest games. On this stand where the Super Mario RPG block was, there's the Koopa Clown Car logo. I guess they felt like they shouldn't only shout out Super Mario RPG and decided to shout out some other Mario lore. Here at the Toadwood Forest, it just occurred to me that the purple water here might not be natural. What if it's actually just byproducts from the Vim factory? And considering the shrooms are purple, I'd rather just not think about that. Speaking of the Vim factory, the Spiny Shroopas actually have an attack against the adult bros that we didn't see. I'm going to solve here by hitting the flee command and then immediately mashing the L button in order to cancel the flee. I probably should have mentioned that earlier, but it's too late for that. So jump forward to one of the bros and roll towards you, and they can even fake out here. They went straight forward for Mario, and then they did the fake out for Luigi. That's an attack we didn't see since we only fight them with... Since you usually only fight them when you have all 4 party members, and when you fight them with 2 members, it's the babies, not the adults. So that's something that's easy to miss. And on the note of Spiny Shroopas, when we were going through the Vim Factory for the first time, I made a guess that the screenshot that was shown that supposedly was a bros item was actually just an ordinary attack for them. I was mistaken for this. In the E3 demo for Partners in Time, there is a screenshot of this unused spike shell attack, and it's listed as a hammer item with 2-man attack and 4-man attack being other categories. I definitely think what we got in the final game was a lot simpler than that, and I approve of that decision to simplify things a bit. Now, on the subject of Yub, in the Super Mario Kun manga, Yub was actually a friendly giant Yoshi who got possessed by Sunnyside and ended up being fine afterwards. It's an interesting deviation from what we saw in the game, and adds a lot to Yub's character even though there wasn't really a whole lot. Aside from the very disturbing implications of Shroob Yoshi hybridization. It occurred to me that we didn't take the time to talk to Egad before we went to Star Hill after going through the time hole in Totown Ruins, and it turns out he doesn't really say anything interesting. Boy, plenty to worry about, or Princess Peach, or poor Princess Peach, that Cobalt Star. I bet coins or croutons that something will happen when the Cobalt Star shards are found. But I'll tell you, youngsters, I can't begin to imagine what that something will be. Something did happen alright. Also, why does this look like a toad drinking a milkshake or something? I'd say it's disturbing that the pillars have what look like toad eyes, but then again, us humans have carbons of humans and pillars, so I guess it's not that strange. Going to the Shurbomb fight, I have to correct myself on several things. I was incorrect about its stats for starters. In the US version, the Shrub Bomb has 95 defense, but will always take 1 damage per attack, no matter what you do to it. This was changed in later versions to 999 defense, but it'll still only take 1 damage per attack. It also had its HP increased from 3,312 in the American versions to 9,999 non-American versions. So it's an interesting stat change, and you can try to defeat the Shrub Bomb if you so wish, but it's also very impractical and you don't get much of a reward from it. And also in this fight, if you beat 2 support Shrubs at the same time, the Shrub Bomb will just fall harmlessly to the ground and nothing will happen. I'm going to try demonstrating that right here with the green shell. I should also mention that you will receive EXP and points from every support Shrub you defeat in this battle, even those that end up getting crushed by the Shrub Bomb. So this actually can be a decent place to grind, but again, I personally wouldn't recommend it. Now, the Elder Shrubwood's spinning attack. You have to hit him 5 times with nearly frame-perfect input in order to actually counter that. I sat here and tried to dodge that several times and only managed to do it once. This is a case where I think making him easier in the other versions was probably for the best, because there's just no fair way you can dodge against that one. Although, it's a little weird because I could have sworn I managed to do it before when I was a kid, so I don't really know what's up with it. Going on to Shrub Castle, I find it weird that in the save album it's called Peach's Castle Past, since at the very beginning they explicitly called it Shrub Castle multiple times. So I don't really get why it's called Peach's Castle Past in the save album instead. But I'm not the developer, so I don't really know. Now for Elder Princess Shrub, her HP was cut from 3,500 to 1,800, but her power was increased to from 130 to 210, her defense from 130 to 150, and her speed from 62 to 100. The stats of her individual body parts were also changed. The crown's speed was changed from 64 to 50, and its power was cut from 140 to 0. This is because the crown having a power stat was just redundant in the first place, since it doesn't have any damaging moves. So that's why they just nerfed it completely. Now the tentacles have their HP changed from 200 to 350, power from 140 to 200, defense from 140 to 126, and speed from 64 to 70. The foot had its HP decreased from 400 to 500, power from 140 to 190, speed from 64 to 50, and its speed from 64 to 50. The last thing I want to talk about for Elder Princess Shrub is her time portal attack. I was incorrect in saying it has like a 0.4% chance of happening. I think I was just had my mind on like catching legendary Pokemon or something. However, that doesn't change the fact that this is still a very rare attack. I sat here and grinded for a bit in the hopes that she would do the attack again, and she eventually did. So this is what happens later on in the second half of the attack. You have to memorize the order in which the saucers were hit, and then counterattack them in that order. I was mistaken in saying that the second wave would happen in the turn after she sets up the attack. Instead, it can happen at any time so long as her feet are still intact. And I also discovered this weird thing where her tentacle clips through the block. So a new discovery, I guess. And now for the very redundant fight at the very end of the game, which I guess is technically the final boss. According to game data, Shrowser is level 100 and has 4,960 HP, meaning each half Shrub of damage is 248 damage. The power of their attack is either 180 or 170. And that's pretty much everything I wanted to say about contents of the story. So instead, let's move on to miscellaneous details about the game itself. Mario Luigi Partners in Time was one of the few games to utilize a DS Rumble Pack. Basically, you put it into the slot in a DS or DS Lite where a Game Boy Advance game could go, and it would rumble during cutscenes where the Shrooms were attacking and the like. But there wasn't much else to say about the Rumble Pack. It's an interesting bit of trivia about the DS, but it didn't really add a whole lot to the game. I think it could have been used in more creative ways, but then again, it would have been kind of crappy if you had to buy a whole accessory to play the game. At least later systems do utilize the rumbling feature though. Now let's talk about Toadsworth. I do not believe this is ever officially said in the game, but his younger self's official name is Toadsworth the Younger. And that is such an awesome name, and I wish he was referred to by that in the game. Although if he was, I just can't remember. I just had to say that at least once before this LP was over. And now for the subject I personally find the most interesting, let's talk about the Shroom text. I was wondering if there actually was any meaning to what the Shrooms were saying, if there was a way you could translate it into plain text. But as far as I can tell, it's gibberish. There's a rumor that if you switch off the Shroom font in the game's files, it turns into a corrupted, almost vowelless form of Japanese. But I honestly don't really buy it, considering how most of the text is just the same lines and symbols repeated over and over again. Although if the one line actually is a corrupted form of the Japanese line for destroy, that would be interesting. But I'm still very skeptical of that rumor, and as of now, I still say it's safe to assume it's just gibberish. Now moving on to subjects outside of the game, on the sheet for the product registration of Partners in Time, they made a pretty bad typo and listed the copyright as Mario Luigi Partners in Crime instead. I don't know if that's actually the official copyright name, I imagine not, but that would be pretty funny if it was. And on a different note, while researching this Let's Play, I found out probably the most disturbing and insane piece of trivia about any game I've played before. A copy of Partners in Time was found in a very unexpected place. Osama bin Laden had a ROM hack of this game found on his hard drive, which the CIA seized after the US military stormed his compound in 2011 and assassinated him in retaliation for the 9/11 attacks. I have no idea what to do with this information. I found out on just a random forum that that was a thing, and I called BS on that. But then I looked into it, and it turns out it was true. So if you told me a year ago that preparing for Mario and Luigi Partners in Time, I would be digging through declassified CIA files in order to find veracity about a rumor, I would not have believed you. But like I said, I really just have no clue what to do with this information. But that's probably the single most insane piece of trivia I've read about any game I've ever played, like I mentioned. So I figured I'd at least have to mention it somehow, but I don't really know what else to say about that. So let's move on and talk about unused content. There is an unused enemy called the Scoop Loop that has unique sprites and even animations, and can also be loaded into the game by hacking, but if you do that, it crashes because basically the Scoop Loop attacks and then the second one tries to go, but the game doesn't know what to do when the Scoop Loop is finishing its attack cycle, so it just freezes. There's also a grassy field map that was used to test the Bros' abilities in the field, and there are also Yoshi eggs in this map that get kicked when you walk into them. I've read some theories that there may have once been a bowling minigame that was intended to be the final game, and I'm so mad if there wasn't. Like I said at the beginning, I wish there was more side content in this game, and I also wish we could use the Bros Ball more to just roll around the areas, and that would have been the perfect fit of those two. So I don't know if that's really true or not, but I honestly buy it. It seems very plausible. Now, for other unused areas, there are also two versions of a map that shows what I think could be an early version of the Gritzy Caves, although I'm not 100% sure. You can see these piranha plant-like tubes, rocks blocking the pathways, fossils, and in the very bottom, a campfire, pipe, and blocks. And I really wish the style of this map was kept. It looks so cool. And I really would have loved to see the other areas done in this style. It looks really engaging and interactable. I guess it's just a shame we never got to see what this area would have looked like in the final game. There's also planned to be a Womp NPC, but it probably was cut because the walking animation just looks really derpy. There's also a different version of the mixed flowers being used in Holly Jolly Village with Boo Guys beneath them. It's interesting to see how it changed, but also how Boo Guys weren't in Holly Jolly Village in the final version. So that's two for the price of one. And now for the one area that I'm actually mad wasn't included in the game. There is an unused map of Beaming Castletown from Mario Luigi Superstar Saga done in the art style for Partners in Time. This actually isn't a one-to-one recreation of Beaming Castletown. The layout is very different, and Starbeam's Cafe has an entirely new design to it. Some people believe that it was never meant to be explored and that it was just drawn up in order to finalize Partners in Time's art style using a reference from the previous game. But I disagree, mainly because A, the layout is remarkably different from what was in Superstar Saga. So if it was just a cosmetic change, it doesn't really make sense why they changed the layout so much. And B, this actually is an explorable map if you hack the game. And if you do, the first thing you find is Toadsworth standing in a tree with the Vin Factory song playing, which is oddly hilarious, not gonna lie. I really wish they had included the Beaming Kingdom in Partners in Time. It would have been a great callback to Superstar Saga, and I honestly think it could have been a suitable replacement for Toad Town. While that area is wonderful, don't get me wrong, I feel like it would have had more of an impact if we had seen an area from the last game in ruins with the shrooms. The music could be the same, you could still have the elderly shopkeepers left alone, the same enemies. But I think it would have been more effective if Toad Town had been an area we had actually explored before instead of just a new iteration of a classic area with a different design. So ultimately, yeah, I really wish they had included the Beaming Kingdom in the final version. Now let's talk about the retail demo of Partners in Time. When you load it up, you can play through Toadwood Forest, Energy Factory, or Yo-Star Island. I believe these are actually the Japanese names of the areas, and I think the English versions are definitely better. When you started these areas, you get a tutorial from Toadsworth on the top screen who is asleep. And this room evokes a very strange feeling in me. I could have sworn I have seen that room in a dream before. It feels oddly familiar to me, and I don't know why. It really weirds me out. It feels like one of those rooms that you'd create in a dream that's like supposed to be an area, a place you know, but clearly isn't that place. It feels like that, but using Partners in Time as a reference. So I don't really know what to think of the room. It has a really cozy looking design, and it's always stood out to me for that reason. There's also a unique tutorial area that's never used in the final game in this demo as well. Now each area also has a text box intro explaining what's going on, and you have to find 5 items in each. In the forest it's golden stars, and on Yo-Star Isle you have to find golden eggs. Now in Toadwood Forest, the stars are found in the area that in the final game was where we launched the flame orbs out of the tree trunks into that central box and then use it to burn our way to the next area. So they kept it quite a bit from the demo in the final game. There also isn't a wooden platform at the start like there is in the final game too. And perhaps most disappointingly, Koopilians were called Neander Koopas in the demo version, and that is such a cool name. There's also a really awesome battle transition, though if I had to guess it might have been scrapped because maybe the hardware couldn't have handled it. But I guess we won't really know. Now, let's leave off with some final thoughts. To start off, I want to talk about beans. I checked through every single area we've been through, making sure that I didn't miss any beans. And I am both very proud and very disappointed in myself, because we only missed one bean, but it also is one of the most obvious spots in the whole game. Right here. It's right there, and somehow I didn't notice it. I don't know what that Lakatufo did either, but somehow I just walked right past this and didn't even notice. So I'm proud of myself for only missing one bean, but I'm disappointed that it wasn't easy to find one. Now here at Peach's Castle, I want to point out how weird the diagonal sprites look. They kind of just look derpy, especially when the bros are just walking on their own. Like, they're just like, the way their arms move just look weird diagonally. I'm not quite sure how else to explain it. That's pretty much all I have to say about that. But now let's go to the subject of how time travel is handled in this game. I've mentioned it before, but the game makes no attempt to try to rationalize time travel, and I definitely think that's for the better. It just owns up to how ridiculous it is and how it doesn't really make any kind of logical sense, and I also think it adds to the charm of the game. However, I feel like the time travel could have been handled better if the shrooms were attacking the present time instead, and Peach's Castle of the past was the hub world instead. You'd have to rewrite the intro to manage that, but I think just that one swap could have helped the story feel a lot more impactful, especially since the shrooms would actually be like a threat and the future would be uncertain. But that's just a minor nitpick. Ultimately, I'm glad with the story we got. And while I would change a few things here and there, I'm ultimately satisfied with it. And that's more or less everything I wanted to discuss in the main game of Mario and Luigi Partners in Time. The very last subject I want to bring up is the very end. There is an unused music for the end that is not even in the North American version's files. It was added in Japan and Europe, and personally I feel like it does sort of clash with the tones of the credits and the dour ending the game has, but it's also just a really beautiful song in its own right, and I want to take some time to appreciate it. With that, thank you all so much for watching. I promise I'd make this Let's Play 6.5, almost 7 years ago by this point. Way back when I was still new to YouTube, and here I am, and it's finally done. I first played this game just after I was first inspired to start making Let's Plays, around the same time I first played Super Paper Mario just like a month later. It's really surreal to be sitting here all these years later, having finally completed it. As for the sequels to this game, I can say with full confidence that someday I will Let's Play Mario & Luigi Bowser's Inside Story, but I do want to explore different frontiers before then. In the past, I've hinted at future Let's Plays that haven't come to fruition for various reasons. It happened way back in Donkey Kong Country Returns, and even as recent as Little Inferno. So I can't really make any definite promises. However, what I will say is that as of recording this video, next time, come back for a new Let's Play where we cover a new series on the channel, and a game that's specifically a version of one of the most influential games of all time. Again, I can't say enough how thankful I am to you all for watching. I also can't say how fun this was to make. I had a lot of struggles throughout it with technical issues and recording issues. There was a point where I lost entire months worth of footage, and that was crushing. I could have finished this a lot sooner had that not happened, but I made it through, and here we are. This has been Mario and Luigi, Partners in Time. And I'll see you all in the next Let's Play. Goodbye for now. I'll see you guys then.